Welcome back to The Political Chick. You are checking it out on CBS's online radio network, chataboutit.com. If you want to join the conversation, ask a question, make a comment, or vent, call 877-CHAT-212. Again, that's 877-CHAT-212. And joining us tonight, he is a very busy man, Mark Hopkins. He's the director of Living in Emergency, the stories, multiple stories of the doctors who volunteer their time for Doctors Without Borders. Mark, welcome to The Political Chick.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I understand you just came from another event and you're calling in fresh off a Q&A.
Yeah, in the middle of a Q&A, yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. Let's talk about your inspiration for the film. You are following these physicians around. Tell me what inspired you to do this. Were you always a fan of Doctors Without Borders?
No, I mean, I was always interested in, I suppose, the world of humanitarian assistance, and within that world, I thought they stood out, being sort of really quite sort of principled and sort of independent and very sort of urgent in the type of work that they did. And I thought that would be a sort of pretty fascinating environment to explore.
Did you explore a lot of other nonprofits out there, or was this one of your top few that, I mean, obviously there are a lot of them that do humanitarian efforts. How did you whittle it down to this as a choice?
Well, I think there's a big split between, I suppose, people that work in development and people that work in humanitarian work. And then within the humanitarian sphere, then there's medicine, and then there's emergency medicine. So I was really trying to find, I suppose, the pointy end of the sort of the most urgent type of work. And in a way, yeah, partly the fact that, you know, what they're there to do, the doctors helping the patients, that's a fairly easily understood idea. Allows you to really explore the environment. So you don't have to spend a lot of time really trying to understand a long 5-year program that's trying to reshape education, and, you know, you can really get to the sort of the guts of what it's like to be in the field in these situations.
And I understand, reading your blog, you were the 26th filmmaker to bring this idea to Doctors Without Borders as a documentary. What was it about you that was the chosen director to do this, since you were number 26?
I'm very lucky, I suppose. We took about 6 months, and I think we're very persistent and spent a lot of time drinking a lot of wine and having a lot of debates with all these people, and really trying to convince them that what we wanted to do was not a sort of cliched sort of cause type of message film, but really a verite, visceral experience, a real like film, I suppose, of what it's like to be with them. And I suppose eventually they thought we could pull it off.
What was it like to be with them? Then we get to see it from the audience point of view, but you were pretty much embedded with these physicians in places like the Congo and pretty dangerous, war-torn places. Did you feel scared at times? Did you know that this was going to be some kind of rush for you, and were you expecting all that you expected, or were you surprised once you finally got your boots on the ground?
No, I mean, it's an all-consuming experience. I mean, it's sort of almost undescribable. I mean, part of the challenge of the film was trying to describe the experience of us being in those environments. We were trying to translate that. So it's, it's like, you know, everything's been turned up to 11. It's really sort of quite a sort of surreal and unlike anything you've ever seen before type of environment. And to the point where you're not even aware of if it's dangerous or not. It's sort of electric in a certain way, but you're not really processing, you know, the reality, I suppose, of seeing people with guns. You don't really register that in a fear sense. You just sort of, it's all part of the craziness of the environment.
How did you go about choosing these doctors that you did follow? Was there certain countries that you wanted to go to, like Liberia, or wind up in Paris? Or did you just say, you know what, these doctors have the most exciting stories? Or did doctors pitch you? Or how did this dynamic work?
Well, we did actually want to try and cast doctors, but we weren't allowed to do that ahead of time. But what we did do was choose a conflict and a post-conflict setting to sort of contrast, you know, war breaks out, they go in, and that has its own sort of set of issues, and then a very different environment, which is a post-conflict, when the whole question of like, oh, the war's over, and now we need to leave and go to the next conflict, raises a whole nother set of, managerial, logistical, and just sort of emotional difficulties for these doctors who have to now pull out of the countries that they've been working in.
Can you talk about the doctors that do sign on? What are the reasons for doing this? Obviously, they're making good salaries somewhere around the world, and what is it? Just their conscience gets them. They want to put this on their resume, or they just have a burning desire to do these missions. But these missions are a minimum of 6 months, so it's quite the huge commitment for them to drop what they're doing at work to move somewhere halfway across the world and volunteer their time. As I understand, they don't get paid, correct?
I think there's a stipend, basic sort of, I don't know, $400 a month type of thing. But no, essentially, obviously, you're not following a traditional medical career as a sort of an expat if you go and work with MSF. But I think there's a whole host of different reasons why people do their first mission, and then I think the key is that you either choose to do a second mission or not. And the reason you choose to do a second mission is because you start to appreciate, I suppose, the value of the patient in front of you despite the overwhelming need, which is a very difficult psychological jump to make, because these situations are so overwhelming, and a lot of first missions just expect that they're going to save the world and realize it's so much harder than they ever thought, and do not do a second mission. So the ones that there's a million reasons why people do their first mission, but the ones that stay on past their first mission, I think it's because they make that connection that the patient in front of them is really why they're there.
Can you talk about the physicians that you followed, just a little bit about their stories and what you liked about their mission?
I'm so sorry?
Can you talk about the specific physicians that you did follow and what you liked in particular about their missions?
Well, we chose a range of physicians who occupied different specters on the experience gradient. So the very first mission, sort of quite inexperienced, all the way through to the 10-year field veteran. And the idea being to sort of compare and contrast, and sort of drew a parallel journey in a way for the audience, what it's like to go from being completely overwhelmed to really being quite seasoned and maybe somewhat jaded. But the people we chose were the unifying characteristic, all completely committed to what they're doing, and just in a way struggling in different ways, and some more successfully than others, with trying to sort of survive and be engaged and sort of take part in the work that they're doing. So, and they all, I think, exhibit different ways of handling that, and they're all, I think, great individuals anyway, but interesting in their own ways.
Which one was your favorite, and did you have a certain experience following one of them around, or say in the Congo that particularly comes to mind that was either mind-blowing or like even the one patient case, the gentleman who got shot in the head, and the physician was without the correct supplies, so I think he drilled his head with something scary that he found in the background there, but it certainly wasn't anything we'd use here in the States in our operating rooms, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of mind-blowing experiences, actually, but that particular one was extremely surreal. So there's a sort of life and death operation going on the one hand, and then on the other hand, people hanging out in a bar with militia that are sort of lurking sort of ominously around, and that was really quite surreal. But it's very difficult to pick a favorite doctor. Quite a lot of them have become, good friends as a part of me being embedded with the field teams for such a long period of time. So,
how about your favorite country? Did you have a specific? I really liked being in the Congo because I've never been here before. It helped me understand the conflict, or why we should try to avoid conflict in the future.
I really enjoyed my time in the Congo, partly because I spent a lot of time growing up in